Okay, awesome. Welcome everyone to our Thrive After Stroke support group. Today is going to be a really fun meeting because we have a panel of four lovely ladies who are going to help us facilitate and talk about a discussion all about return to work post-stroke. So each of them are going to take about 5 minutes to talk a bit about themselves and how they can offer some expertise on this subject. And then, as Julie mentioned, afterwards, we'll open the discussion. And you guys are welcome to ask questions to any of these four ladies. And then we will stop the recording towards the end so that you can ask questions off the recording as well. So I have a bit of a list of the four ladies in order, but does anyone volunteer to go first of the four of you? No, no hands raised. Okay, so maybe we'll start with Annie. If you want to unmute yourself, you can go ahead and share.
Sorry. Um, Hi, my name is Annie. I've been part of the support group for the last almost 4 years, I think. Um, but so I wasn't really sure what I wanted to talk about today. I There are so many aspects to the return to work process, and uh, so I was going to focus mostly on my return to work process, the tools, but then I was thinking there's so many other aspects of the challenges, the social relationships, ableism in the workplace, and just trying to be part of the community while you do this. And this already impacts our lives so much. Um, and I think we could discuss that for hours probably. Um, I typed a lot of this up, so I apologize in advance if I sound a little bit like a robot at times. So just some background on me. I had a ischemic stroke at November 30th, 2021. It impacted my cerebellum and midbrain. After I left the hospital, I was part of a couple provincial rehab programs, early supported discharge, which was in my home, and then the CAR program, a community accessible rehab here in Alberta. I was off work just under 3 years, and I was very lucky to be job attached. But so the goal was always to return to the same position. I I guess so. My role, I was a scientist, a hydrogeologist, but my position focused mainly on project management for a contaminated site. It was an important aspect because it was almost entirely computer based, but had to switch tasks switch frequently and um, kind of deal with stressful situations inside and outside of work hours, and this was just not something I could go back to, especially right away. Um, some of the symptoms that really impacted me and the return was general mobility, ataxia, and weakness and pain on different sides of my body. But my speech and vision and processing were also impacted. Um, and then as a result of all of these things, headaches, fatigue, and that brain buzz just kind of floored me on a daily basis. And combining this with computer work and cognitive work, it was a really big challenge. So when I started my return to work, it was really challenging working with um, healthcare rehab, insurance, and my HR. And I could probably talk about that for hours too. But I think one important part is that um, you you often end up just talking to people individually, and you aren't always part of the group discussion. And so it was really hard to figure out what I was returning to and the exact role if I couldn't go back to the exact role, if what I had to figure out what I was going to do. So eventually I entered another program that I applied for through my insurance, and this was specific to my return to work. And then I I made my return to work from there after a number of months. And I'm currently full time. It took about 9 months to get there. Uh, but I guess so a 5 day work week for me, like an 8 or 9 hour day is not feasible. So I have to try and supplement that by say taking days off or negotiating to work from home. So I guess the point is that it even when you're back to work and things are supposed to be okay, it's still a challenge and a journey to manage your work and your health as you go. Um, I was going to talk about tools that I use for work hardening or functional cognitive training, as called it. Um, but I will just post them in the chat. It's just a bunch of links for different things behind the paywall or uh, just in front of one uh, with limited items. Um, but uh, and I'll just post that. Um, the other thing uh, that I wanted to talk about that I won't really is kind of the negotiation process and figuring out accommodations. Um, just because it's a challenge and very important, but I think the point is you need to advocate for yourself, and I wish I had more, but it's a challenge as well. Um, and then but there's this one thing I'd like to talk about if there's still time. Um, the so the last thing I want to talk about is therapy and recovery fatigue. So um, when I started my return to work, I became very therapy out. I was tired of daily exercises. I was tired of targeting those issues, and I was tired of talking about the stroke. I guess I was just tired of recovering. And at what point could I just be me and not have like this future me that I'm supposed to be? Um, Partly because of this, and partly because I just didn't have any time or energy. I just stopped all of it. I stopped the physical kind of exercising. I stopped the cognitive exercising. I stopped really looking at mental health. But more recently, I've been trying to do that again, of like trying to exercise a bit more, put my health a bit higher on the list of importance, working on mental health. And I think it's important during the return to work or the recovery journey is that it needs to be for you as well. It shouldn't all just be focused on you becoming a acceptable human shaped block to go in a hole. It's really hard, and I struggle with it, and I know everyone does, but I think the moral of the story is that you need to find things that fill your cup and be in spaces where you can be yourself, and it's a journey. Like it will just continue to change as you get there. That's all I got.
That's awesome, Anna. Thank you so much for sharing just like a tiny bit of your journey. A tiny bit. And like, this is the one thing, one of the few things I'll reiterate that stood out to me when you were talking. Like, we talked about five-ish minutes, share your story. And like, that's a short amount of time, but like, you are sharing 3 years of your journey. And in it, you even said that it took 9 months for you to get back to full time. Like that's massive. That's a long period of time. And like it's not as simple as like this 5 minute conversation or 5 minute share that you just had. So like bravo for all that work, honestly. And I will share really quickly. It's been so cool, Annie, watching you grow from 4 years ago to when you joined this group to now. It's been so, so cool. So I really hope you're patting yourself on the back for how far you've come. And the other things that I want to share again with the group that stood out to me when you were talking, um, was you are often finding yourself having one-to-one conversations with multiple people and not being, I think, in the group conversation. So communication was like you weren't exactly sure what you were getting back into. I thought that was really
Yeah,
a good point that you made. Um, and then I was writing down when you were talking, so I'm just looking at my notes. Okay, then the other point that you made was you're getting tired of recovery,
yeah.
recovering. And that's like, I actually don't even, that's crazy to say some, like, I don't even know how to feel about it. I completely understand what you mean. I think sometimes we get stuck in this, like, we're trying to be better, like, go, 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 go. And at what point can we just take a breath? And then when we take a breath, it feels like we're being stagnant. And then we are hard on
Yeah.
ourselves for doing that. So, yeah, I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions that just came out of your share. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you.
So the next person that I'd love to hear from is Erin with an E. Erin, if you want to unmute yourself and go ahead and share.
Yeah. Hi everyone. My name is Erin. I have been, I think, a part of this group now. I don't know, one of my good friends from work put me in touch with Julie, which was awesome. So I guess I said my friend at work. So I did go back, obviously. I'm back at work right now because of my situation. So I kind of had, it's a little weird. I explain it as like a man-made ischemic stroke because of the condition I have, which is an AVM, which I know Ella, you know about that. It bled, so it's almost like an aneurysm that burst. And in fixing that, they closed off a part of my brain that should not have been closed off. So, where my impact is a little bit strange, I guess, is what I've been told. In that it's just my motor region. So you can't even tell on a computer, which is one thing about work that I'll talk about. But I it impacted my whole left side. So I did learn to walk again and with with a brace and help. But I spent I want to say like a month in the hospital and then a month and a half in like inpatient rehab. And then I actually ended up I have two little boys. So I'll mention that. My youngest son turned one while I was in rehab. Um, and because of having two little boys, I ended up staying at my parents' for 7 months after the stroke just to be like, I'm just going to recover. And I really thought if I work really hard at the end of 7 months, I will be back. We all know that that's foolish, but I, so needless to say, I'm not back. Physically, I still have um, a lot of issues with my left side. And as I was just saying, it is weird because we're remote, which I will say one thing, I hate being remote, but I'm very thankful that it's a thing because my job was in Midtown Manhattan. I live nearby, and there just wouldn't be any way that I would be able to navigate that every day. Um, and before COVID, they were not letting people be remote. So that is something that I'm thankful for. And I was able to move out of the city and work from home and still do my job. One thing that I did experience that I thought that is interesting, and because of my condition, I've actually been in and out of work a few times because it has continued to bleed. However, it hasn't impacted me physically anymore, just my mental state. But the first time, that's the main one I wanted to talk about. When I did come back to work, I'd worked for the company for around 9 years. So I point that out to say I'm so thankful that I'd worked for them for a long time and that they knew me, they knew my work. Um, the reason I'd stayed there is because we have amazing health insurance. And so I'm very thankful that I was there. Um, and they also do FMLA. I think you have to do that. But they do you, is that a thing in Canada? I don't know. Um, it's like it's
Explain
something,
what that is.
it's I forget what it stands for, but pretty
Yeah.
much it means if you leave your job for a medical reason or certain you have a certain amount of time that you don't get paid. It's unpaid, but they can't get rid of your job. So they can't replace you. So it's job security, but without the pay. My job, which was not really widely known, pays during it. So I didn't know this because I had to leave. I had no choice. But mine did pay during it. So I took all of it that I could. And then I eased back into working to full time, similar to Annie. And I used like vacation days. Oh, thank you, Carrie. I used vacation days and different things to kind of make it so that it would become full time in their minds. And I like slowly took responsibilities while I was gone. So one thing that was interesting to me is it is a very young company. Like I think I'm on the older end of it. Um, and so people are not used to dealing with stroke. And we kind of have a startup setup in that like we just got a real HR department recently. So this was the first. Like this was the first time that they'd ever dealt with anything of this magnitude. So I really was in the like they learned. Like they've come out with a lot of policies now, which I'm very thankful for. They were willing to learn, but we kind of made it up as we were going. But because I had worked there for so long, they were willing to do that. But one of the things that struck me now, it didn't in the moment, is that they had restructured my team while I was gone, and they had put me in a position to manage 11 people. Now, to me, that felt like you don't really have a grasp on one, you didn't talk to me yet. So for stroke, a lot of times there's cognitive element to it. So like you obviously don't really know about stroke because you wouldn't move me to manage 11 people upon my return. Um, and so it was just an interesting thing that no one could relate to. Um, they did, I was able to ease into it with like still having the flexibility to go to PT and OT and all that. But as I mentioned, I was at my parents' house, not in my life yet. So really just work and rehab were my life. And so it became a different ball game when I got back to my family. And then I was like a mom again, as well as working full time. Um, and with managing people, something that I found was that it was really hard for me, still is, but it was really hard for me to listen to what I considered petty grievances, like where it was like, that's actually not a big deal. Like I just relearned how to walk for the last few months. And so as a manager, you can't do that, right? Like I can't be like, get over it. So I found that I was angry a lot of the time at just like how foolish. And I'm sure I felt I was like that too before this, but it just felt like no one has this like experience and I can't relate to my family in any way about it. The people at work, they don't understand and they can't see me. So they don't understand that like I can't type anymore. So it's frustrating. Like I felt like I'm not able to ever forget about it. Like I can't just get into the work and forget that this happened because as soon as I go to the computer, which is where I work on all day, I can't use it like I used to. Um, but again, I'll just say that like to everyone else, I look fine. So it was like it's a frustrating thing to just be feel like you're not being seen fully. And so that's been one thing that's been really hard. And then one thing I'll say is that it has put, as I said about the managing, it has put things into perspective. I will not say that there's any silver line because there isn't. I don't think like this is horrible for all of us. But that certain things about work, it put in perspective of like, I'm not going to work all the time and not see my kids. Like I just, there's too many things. Like I fought to be here, not to work nonstop. So that was something that I have shifted, and thankfully my manager is amazing. And because I had left two other times, they decided that managing people might not be the best thing. So they have created a new role. So one thing with that is that I'll say, like, ask the people to be, can they be creative with you? Like, is there something, we all have something to offer that's unique. So, like, how can we make it work? In this case, they made it so that I am more of a project manager. So my schedule is super flexible, even more than it was. So I can go to PT and OT or just like, I got to take a nap today. Like there have been several days where I've said, I just can't be online. Like I could technically be here, but I'm not mentally or physically in the state of mind. So I feel like being honest about that. Um, I think Annie mentioned, yeah, accommodations is a really tricky thing that I found to navigate. And because of that, I did start an ERG, which is called an employee resource group. It's something that my organization does, and started one for people that with visible or invisible disabilities, or that like can identify with that, um, because no one knows what's available to them. And the HR department didn't know what to offer, and they still don't. But I didn't want myself or anyone else to have to, you kind of have to say over and over, here's what I need and here's why I need it. And so it just feels like rehashing, like, because this thing happened to me, and just trying to make it more uh, obvious on what you can ask for, because it can be awkward to be like, hey, this is what I need to do my job. Am I allowed to ask for that? So I will say that if you're wherever you're going doesn't like clearly bring that up, to ask, because they have to. Like you're a protected class. And so they have to accommodate you to a certain degree. And so really, I feel like for me, one of the big things was not feeling weird about it, and like you're not being needy or like these are things that you have a right to, and they can't like disqualify you from work or anything like that for those things. And even my work, now that it's remote, holds these org-wide retreats, which would have been my jam in my future, I mean, my past life, but now that's really nerve-wracking to me and hard to navigate. Um, so they have started to put some things into place, but to me, I think a big part of it was like, you have to tell people don't know. They don't know like what we need. And so being really clear with like, if you want me to participate in this thing, this is how I can. And I've been able to be excused from some of these things because I don't physically feel comfortable being by myself with people that don't know what I've been through, um, and don't know how to accommodate me. So overall, I guess I would say that I'm still learning and there's still frustrating pieces about it. Um, but I do have a really good, for better or worse, work-life balance in that I just feel like this is, at least for me, this is for money. Like I'm not super passionate about my job. So it's really like I'm passionate about my family right now. And so I can easily separate where I couldn't before because I always felt like, what's next? How can I grow? How can I do that? And it's really showed me that I don't know if I'd be capable of grow. Like right now, mentally, I couldn't take it on. Like there's so many other things that I'm thinking about all the time. For instance, but like how am I gonna get downstairs if a package comes? Like little stupid, like that you never thought you'd have to think about. And now I do that I, yeah, I just don't have the capacity to use that. Like those, I don't know what I'm like those brain waves or something to think about work. I need to think about navigating my new situation. Um, and so I'll also say because of that, always navigating, I can forget things a lot. So I don't know. They tell me it's not because of the brain injury, but I'm really bad at remembering things. And so I've been trying to find tricks at work to remember things, or be really honest with people and say, like, don't feel bad reminding me. Like, what did you need me to do? Like, just tell me again, I'm not offended. Um, so just figuring out, I think, like, what do I need? How can I ask for it? And how do I feel okay asking for it? And it doesn't mean I'm any less of a worker or employee. That's been a big struggle.
Wow, thank you, Erin, as well, for sharing so much of your journey and just being so honest and vulnerable. Seriously, amazing work. Thank you, thank you. Um, I there were again a couple things that I wrote down as you were talking that stood out to me. Um, the most recent one was that I think you were feeling uncomfortable being or like working with people or being around people who didn't know how to accommodate you. And I can only imagine like, well, this was the first instance you said that the company you work for was dealing with something of this magnitude. So this was like this was a learning curve for them too. And even though you had been there for 9 years, and so I can imagine that when we open it up to Q&A, there might be other people who are now looking to work at a completely different company. Or I think we had somebody before was it Jeremy? I don't know if he's on this call, who was starting school again and like navigating brand new things and having to tell people, by the way, this is what happened to me. And this is as the outcomes are like, I could be forgetful and not actually wanting to have that conversation. And yeah, so many tricky things to navigate. And then the one other thing I'll point out that really caught my attention was you said there's no silver lining here. Um and like why it caught my attention was is because it was your honesty was funny and you said it with a smile. And it was almost like this paradox because you said there's no silver lining, but you said it with a smile. And I get it because it was funny, right? Because it was the vulnerability and like the honesty of it. And then maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth whatsoever, but like to humor me a little bit, maybe the silver lining or the one little piece of positive is that resilience and the humor that you're kind of gaining from this whole experience, maybe. I don't know. It was just kind of funny that you said it with a smile, so I wanted to share that and point it
Yeah.
out.
Thank you. I think honestly, and I don't know if we can all relate, it depends on the day, right? Like in this moment right now, and like when people say, how are you doing? I feel like I now change it to like right in this moment, I'm doing okay.
Mm.
So to your point, Ella, like right now, in this moment, I'm feeling like glad to be here. I love this group. So I can smile with that. You catch me in another moment. I'm probably not smiling about that.
I totally get that. Thank you again for sharing. All right, guys. So we had our two amazing stroke survivors share their stories. We're gonna move over to the two professionals on our panel. So I'll go with Alex Wardrope next. She can introduce herself and share her story, Alex.
Okay, hello. Hi, everyone. Uh, Microphone's okay over here? Yeah, okay, perfect. So yeah, my name's Alex. I am a registered social worker at Hamilton Health Sciences. I have just over 5 years of experience there, worked in different departments, but most recently I've been working in the spine and neuro rehab field, both in the inpatient and the outpatient setting. So part of my role, pretty general. General overview is supporting patients and their families, their caregivers with the different challenges that can come up with being in hospital for an extended period of time or transitioning home after being in hospital for a while. So yeah, just the many challenges that can come up. A lot and a lot of that can center around finances. You know, I'm in hospital now. I'm going to be out of work for a period of time. You know, what do I do? So we navigate different financial supports together based on, again, based on their employment history, what they have access to. So we look into a lot of, yeah, different different accommodations that they have. Again, here in Ontario, that looks different. For us here, we have employment insurance, or people have, you know, people have critical illness insurance, people have short-term, long-term disability insurance. It all depends on what they've been paid into. So a lot of times that comes with a lot of paperwork, unfortunately. And obviously, if you're in hospital, you know, that's not the easiest thing to do, or your mind is going to so many other places. So part of my role is supporting patients and their family with that paperwork. I know it can get really frustrating for some people at times because they feel like they have to share their story over and over and over again. And it can feel like, you know, I have to justify myself. I have to explain this over, you know, it can get really tough for people to have to go through that. So I really encourage people, again, whether you're inpatient, to access the supports in hospital that you have, or a person that you trust, a support person, to help you with some of that paperwork or help you navigate that, because you're already probably dealing with so much already that it's helpful to have a support person there, to tackle that together. So yeah, I would say utilize benefits that you have access to. Some people, you know, it's really hard for them to think about, you know, I can't go back to work right now. You know, a lot of what we do for work really dictates our identity. You know, you go to a party or you go out and meet someone, usually the first thing is, oh, well, what do you do for work? So it really, that title that you have holds a lot of impact. So it can feel like a bit of a loss of identity. Well, I can't work now. What does that mean? Who am I now? So that's pretty tough, and people can feel pressured to have to go back to work right away, whether it's because they don't have any benefits, so they feel like they need to get back to start earning an income. Um, Again, just some people have said, you know, I've been working since I was 15 years old. You know, I don't take a day off. People really pride themselves on that. So it can be hard to you know, realize that, hey, maybe I need to take some time to focus on me, to focus on my recovery. So I really, yeah, really counsel people through, again, the financial, again, getting them set up to financial support during this time, and also counseling through, you know, maybe they've been home for a period of time, their short-term disability, if they're on it, is ending, and they're waiting for this kind of switch to flip one day to say, like, okay, I wake up and I tell myself, okay, I'm ready today. You know, what does that look like? And for a lot of people, they think, yeah, I'm going to wake up one day and I'll just feel ready. And a lot of times that doesn't, you know, don't get to that point. We don't just wake up one day and say, okay, yep, today's the day I feel ready to go back to work. So yeah, there can be a lot of pressure, and there can be a lot of difficulty in living in those unknowns, like that unknown timeline. And I think I heard Erin mention, you know, in some ways it can be a bit of an invisible illness. You break an arm, you break a leg. It's very much, okay, I'm in a cast. People can see that. People can see that I'm in a cast or I'm on crutches. And it's a bit more validating. But when it's, again, this invisible illness and we feel we need to justify it to people, well, I had difficulties with this, with that things that aren't always outwardly seen. People can sometimes feel that, well, I have to prove myself. I have to prove that, I've had an injury. I have to prove myself that I actually do need this time off, and it can be hard dealing with some employers, some managers too. It's important to know what, again, depending on where you live, it's important to know what the what the regulations are, what the laws are like. Like here in Ontario, we have the Employee Standards Act. So people are legally entitled to be off of work for a period of time without risk of their job being given away. So it's a bit of job security there. And to be careful about the language that you use too with your employer, because they don't always need to know, what is your diagnosis? What are your symptoms? What are the things, obviously you want to work with them on different accommodations, things like that. But some people feel, again, the need to share it all with them when really, again, based on the laws of where you are, they don't need to know all of those details. Again, but there's sometimes the feeling of, well, I need to justify my situation. I need to justify myself. So I would just say to be mindful about that. And there's different, again, based on where you are, there's different employment agencies out there too. Like one here in Canada that we have is the March of Dimes. They have employment services, so they can, again, if you're trying to get back out into the workforce to find a new job, or if you're trying to get back into or returning to work, they could be a good option to connect with there, or even looking at maybe volunteering first as an option to kind of dip your toe back into things. And I would really, again, if you're on a if you're on a sick leave or if you're on a short-term disability leave, sometimes these companies have like return to work programs or modified work that you can return to. Again, some people feel like I just want to go right back into it. I would say, utilize the benefits that you have access to, because that's why they're there. So things like returning to work part-time or going in for half days. Again, whatever that modified work looks like for you. And I think a big thing too, I think Erin mentioned as well, is prioritizing your health while you're working. And I think a lot of us in this day and age, again, see, doing the maximum as what is considered successful. We're always working overtime or working through lunch or working different side hustles. That can be, oh, well, that person is, wow, they go nonstop, so they must be so successful. But really, that culture that we've created, this, this Superman, this Mission Impossible type person where we can just, go. It's not really accurate. We're not really meant to do that as humans. It's okay to take a break. Recovery and recuperation is its own form of work, really. So, don't forget about taking your lunch breaks, taking your breaks in general, leaving on time, things that, again, at the end of the day, you're going to be working, you could potentially be working for a long, long time. So establishing those habits early on is very important. And you might have employees too who, are concerned and their hearts are probably in the right place, but they might want to, again, well, what happened? Tell us what happened, and that's your story to share with people as much or as little as you want to, because it's your own personal story. And again, there might be things at work that you're not able to take on anymore, or you just can't. Maybe you were the person who said yes to every task and you took on everything, even though it made you stay late or work through lunch. And now things are going to look a bit different. reminding yourself that no can be a complete sentence, and it doesn't have to be followed up with a justification of, oh, no, I can't, I'm just so busy, or no, I can't, I worked through lunch, 3 days this past week, whatever it is, it doesn't need to be justified. No, in and of itself can just be a complete sentence there. So that's generally what I do is, again, supporting people when they're initially inpatient, trying to figure out, what do I do now? And then as well as in the outpatient setting too, counseling them on, just their overall, yeah, like I think I'm ready to return to work. I don't know, maybe I am. And for me, luckily, I don't work just like on my own. I work with a team. So very much work with people like physiotherapy and occupational therapy on different return to work aspects. So if you have access to either of those things, I would say it's really great to utilize.
That was lovely. Thanks so much, Alex.
Yeah, thanks.
Um, again, a few things that you said. I'll be much briefer this time, because I really want to get to the open discussion. We still have to get through Sabrina. Erin pointed out one of the things that I did want to bring up. She's written in the chat there. What you said, no can be a complete sentence. Love that. Like I can't say more than that. It's so great. You mentioned the work being tied to your career and identity, such a big one. I'm sure so many people can relate. I know I can. Um, at least I was younger. For me, it was school. And then waiting for that switch to flip, that one day you'll just wake up and be ready. And as we've heard from Annie and Erin, like that takes time to get there. So, again, thanks so much for sharing. So the last lovely lady that we have on our panel here is Sabrina. So Sabrina can go ahead and share.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. And Erin and Annie, I just want to say I hope you guys are really proud of how much you've accomplished because it's really exceptional and it says a lot. And thank you for sharing with the group as well. So my name is Sabrina Seibel. I am a personal injury lawyer. I practice in Hamilton, Ontario, but service represent clients all over Ontario. Just some feedback. So I'm also the vice president of the Hamilton Brain Injury Association here in Hamilton, which is an organization that supports individuals who have suffered brain injuries and their families, providing, support groups like this one, which is so important because I know depending on where you are, there are actually very limited, free or funded services and support available, especially once you get to a certain point in your recovery. In terms of kind of my role legally and professionally, I tend to represent, my clients have been injured and they're sometimes often not able to return to work, but sometimes able to return to work. So I'm kind of supporting them in the background and see some of the challenges they face with that return. And then on the other side of it, I'm dealing with people who have been terminated from their long-term disability plan, and we're having to advocate it and litigate on their behalf. So I can definitely speak to kind of those two areas. A couple of things I'll just share generally before we go to the open discussion, but one of the things I frequently see for both clients that are trying to return to work or people who've been terminated from long-term disability is that they do try to do too much too soon. And it's much, much easier from both a legal insurance standpoint and an employer-employee standpoint to go slow, to not try to do much. It's much harder to pull back once you've kind of started down a path than to just start slow. And it really, I think maybe you both mentioned or Annie mentioned, you really have to advocate for yourself. And so often I see people, their doctor says, okay, here's the plan. And people just agree with their doctor because they think, okay, the doctor's, the expert, they must know, but they're really not at all. They're just picking something off the top of their head. They're not an expert and they're not necessarily asking you those questions. I know the appointments are rushed. You feel pressured. You have very little time with your doctor, especially in Ontario. But really taking the time to explain what you think you need and being specific, because that's going to help the employer, will help the insurer to be aware of what the doctor is specifically, suggesting. But the doctor is only going to know if you advocate for yourself and let them know. And so often when we have issues, whether it's the employer causing the issue or the insurer causing the issue, it's because there's this disconnect. There's a disconnect between, what the employee is saying to the doctor, what the doctor is saying to the employer. And I think Annie mentioned it, you feel like you're not part of this conversation that's going on without you. And I see disconnect when I just look at the documents and the emails, I see just there's this disconnect, usually with the doctor not being specific enough. And again, that comes back to the doctor and the employee conversations and what you're asking for, and to try to be that specific. So that's kind of a general kind of overview of what I noticed. The other thing I would say is if you are dealing with a long-term disability situation where you are receiving benefits, that it is very specific. Please don't Google or use ChatGPT. I can tell you, I love AI and I want to embrace it, but I ask legal questions all the time just to test it, and a lot of, like, more often than not, it's just wrong. So particularly for long-term disability policies, every single policy is different. It's a contract, so you have to look at your specific policy to see what are you required to do, what are you entitled to, and all of those things. And usually lawyers, you can consult with a lawyer, usually free of charge. If you do have questions about that, I'm certainly always happy to speak to anyone that's in a situation like that, because it is all in that contract. If you are in a union situation, there's an additional layer, because there might be portions of the return to work plan or policy in the collective bargaining agreement. So that's yet another document written in, legal jargon that can be hard to get through. Hopefully you have a union to support you, and your union is supposed to be there to help you navigate that. And you pay for that with your union dues when you were working. So it is important to access that that benefit if you are in that situation. The last thing I'll just kind of share is some red flags that can come up and cause problems. And just to be aware of is that when you are speaking to your doctor or your treatment team, to be careful not to say things like, I'm never going back to work. I don't want to go back to work. I don't want to go back to work at X, whatever your employment was. Or I don't want to go back to work because it's toxic. My boss is a jerk, or whatever the case may be, because insurance companies will love to pick up and say, oh, that's the reason why you're not going back to work, not because of these challenges, not because. So you have to be kind of mindful of those things, but that so easily is where they'll see something like that, latch onto that, and then you'll find yourself in litigation. So that's just kind of some general things to speak that I want to speak to. But if there's any specific questions, once we have the open discussion, feel free to ask.
That was great. Thank you so much, Sabrina.
Welcome.
I feel like I just learned so much there. I didn't, like, as most of you or all of you probably know, I was 14, so mine was a return to school, and I can only imagine how difficult it would be to navigate all the paperwork and the meetings. And I was lucky to have support and my parents. Not everybody is. So yeah, I can only imagine. Two things that stood out to me when you shared were, and they go hand in hand. Don't do too much too soon. I think that's a common thread that I've heard from all four of you. It's harder to pull back than to just ease into things and go slowly. And anybody else who's gone through the return to work process or return to whatever it is, or really just this return to life that we call recovery, I think we can all kind of learn that going slow is the way. Because if you do too much too soon, you get tired and you can get discouraged and all that. So I will Julie and I will open the floor up for discussion now. Keep in mind that we are still recording, so we'll let the recording go for a period of time, and then once we've kind of exhausted our questions, we'll take the recording off, and then you can ask questions offline, or I guess off the recording. And if you have a question that's specifically for one of the four panelists, you can direct it directly towards them. Otherwise, any four of them can jump in. So whoever has a question, you can take yourself off mute, or raise your hand if there's a bunch of us. And I know there's a few who don't have cameras on, so if you have, I guess you can raise your hand digitally or just even type in the chat.
Aaron raised his hand.
Great.
Hey, I just want to say, yeah, thanks everybody for sharing your stories and your experience. I guess I'll just start with an easy one, because I'm pretty much starting from zero. And I've been on disability, need to apply to work. So, I guess my question is for Alex is, when do I have to state kind of like either during the resume or maybe the application process that I have either a brain injury or a heart injury or my amputation or multiple diagnosis. Like when do I need to disclose kind of those things when I'm, applying to jobs?
Yeah, great question. I think some of that can come out maybe during like when you're doing the interview stage, just to let them know, again, if you're confident in sharing the accommodations that you need, if you know that already, if you're comfortable sharing that, I think that's a good time. A lot of employers, they have their own, again, accessibility standards that they have to adhere to, whether in their own company or just at a provincial, again, wherever you're located level. So again, you can do a bit of your research on that, to see what kind of standards are in place, where you're located. But a lot of employers should have that in place too already, that they have to adhere. Yeah, they have to adhere to different people who have different abilities or need certain accommodations. So that would be a good time to bring that up.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Great question.
Thanks, Erin. Ooh, it's a quiet group. Wow. Oh, I see Doug.
Hey guys. I just like to ask, I see this a lot in our groups through March of Dimes and stuff, that I see a lot of younger survivors, in their late 30s, early 40s, and they're somewhat getting harassed by the long-term disability to get them back to work and get them back to a graduated back to work schedule and stuff like that. And be honest with you, just looking at them and knowing them from the groups, I can tell you that they're not ready to go back to work. So they're rushing themselves back. And these individuals actually have long-term disability. So I basically try to tell them, because in my situation, I was management at General Motors, and I thought I was going back to work. And what ended up happening is my neurologist finally said, I'm going to send you to a neuropsych evaluation. And so she did that. And that's like a 6-hour test thing that goes on. And I got done with that test, and I came home, and I said, I aced that. I aced that evaluation. Come to find out, when we got the results, I bombed on it. I totally did bad, and it was because I've lost my executive function. So I can't plan. I can't do any of the stuff that needs to be done to be a manager at a corporation, right? So I couldn't go back to work. So I was forced into retirement, and and get long-term disability until I'm 65. But what I try to tell these kids is I'm 62, so I try to tell these younger people that maybe before you actually go back, I kind of suggested they get that neuropsych evaluation if they can, just to see are their what are uh, their problems that they're having, right? Because that's going to tell you exactly what's going on and if you're going to be able to do it or not. So I think that's a good way of going about it. But I'd like to hear you guys' um, take on that. Is that a good advice or no?
I did that neuropsych evaluation before I went back. The insurance wanted me to do it, and it was extremely long and arduous. But
Yes.
I thought it was kind of handy for targeting what you need to work on for those things, uh, and also identifying um, uh, what is like if some what exactly uh, are your deficiencies. Um, because you might assume it's one way, but those tests, they test you from different angles,
Yep.
and it might be completely different because I thought my memory was quite poor, but it was more that I had trouble. It was like a confidence and decision making thing. And I just would second guess everything, so I couldn't remember what it was. I also had sometimes like it wasn't my memory, it was my encode like me paying attention to it, like encoding versus like actually remembering it. If I remember it great. But if I like stub my toe at the same time, it's gone forever. Yeah, I think that could be a handy test. It's just here it takes a long time to get it. You wait 4 or 5 months, and then you wait another few months for the report.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just comment if you don't mind. Yeah, Doug, I think that's a really good observation and a great point. And that is one option is a neuropsych. It does take a long time specifically in Hamilton area to get one funded. Sometimes, again, depending on your policy, you might have some coverage for a neuropsych assessment to do privately is another
Mhm.
option. And the other thing is to keep in mind every policy is different. Some long-term policies are if you can't go back to your job that you were doing, you're entitled to that benefit to age 65. So not another job, not a modified job. If you can't do your job, you have access to these benefits. So anyone that's feeling pressured, it's usually just a matter of getting the right documentation in place from the treatment providers to be able to be continued to be covered. And then it doesn't have to be forever. They're probably scared. No, I don't want to have this forever. I want to get back to work. But forget about that. Focus on your recovery, access the benefit that you have coverage for and,
That's what I tell them.
yeah, reevaluate down the road, right? And if they need to seek legal advice, they should, because they should not feel pressured or bullied by some of these companies and people that are really
Yep.
brutal.
Yes. Yeah, and they are, right? So, but what they tell me is that I'm too young. I'm too young. I don't know what I'll do. Well, I'll tell you what you're gonna do, and just like you said, you're gonna help yourself in your recovery, and you're gonna get paid till you're 65. So, you know, find something else. You're gonna be able to find something a hobby or something that's gonna fulfill your needs, right? So, yeah.
Interesting.
I'll even add to that, Doug. Like when you said find something else, it reminded me of what Erin was saying about how her employers were really flexible and creative by making a new
Yeah,
role for her. And then Alex also mentioned that we have a tendency to associate our identity with our jobs. And so yeah, sometimes it's just the fact of willing to be very uncomfortable. We're already in a very uncomfortable situation and difficult to navigate situation. So it's kind of like taking that additional uncomfortable step and maybe recognizing that you do have to pivot into something different or something else. But
yeah,
we are multitudes, I guess I would say.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I've even heard the horror stories, about going back to work and getting let go. I just shake my head. I just go, I don't think you can, I don't think that's legal, but I don't know for sure. So, I just, yeah, I hate to hear something like that, right? So,